The Cavendish debacle assumed going into the experiment that gravity was going to affect the inert objects, and so when the inert objects were attracted, then we allegedly proved gravity. This is the sort of incomplete scientifical nonsense we must deal with all across the board when it comes to heliocentric illogic. And the foundational pillars for our worldview that rest on such folly as the Cavendish experiment, where you must assume the conclusions prior to going into the experiment. It's plainly obvious to me that what goes up must come down is probably caused by a harmonic resonance between objects with similar densities. Temperature also plays a role in this equation, along with the surface area of an object. So if you have a hot air balloon filled with cold air, it won't float very well, and the object will be stuck to the ground at rest, in balance with nature. When you heat the air in the balloon, does this bumbling, heavy balloon defy gravity as a warping of space-time that is so powerful it pins the oceans of the world to a perfect level curve while they spin over 1,000 miles per hour near the equator? Or does the hot air balloon simply obey the laws of density and buoyancy? When sunlight hits the ocean, the smallest particles of heated water begin to evaporate, and gravity doesn't lift a finger to stop them from floating up for miles and even coalescing into large clouds. But the massive ocean of water spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, well, gravity's got that covered, no problem. But when it comes to nearly weightless clouds, gravity cannot overcome the buoyant force compelling the cloud to its natural altitude. So gravity is so powerful it can keep all the ocean stuck to the side of a spinning ball, but it's so weak it cannot even keep a single molecule of water vapor from rising miles into the air. The theory I'm describing would explain this very nicely. The ocean of water is all vibrating at a molecular level at a similar harmonic frequency. As the water near the surface is heated by the sun, it becomes excited and begins to fall out of harmony with the rest of the water, and is therefore compelled to behave in accordance with the laws of density as dictated by nature. The water vapor isn't going to go lower beneath the ocean, as that would be indicative of a heavier, denser substance. So the law of density and buoyancy is sufficient to explain what goes up must come down in reality. However, the missing piece to the puzzle is becoming apparent to me. Since we still need a tendency for down to be down, the fact that all matter is vibrating at one frequency or another could explain why the higher density objects find their way down and lower density objects find their way up. Considering the flat Earth model, this makes perfect sense to me in terms of why the sun is up in the sky. If modern science is correct, which I have my doubts, but if they're correct and the sun is comprised mainly of hydrogen and helium, it would make a lot of sense that such light elements could be fixed to the astral plane. If the stars in the night sky are more distant in altitude or higher up than the sun, then it makes sense that they would be less dense than the sun. I think it's totally plausible that the lead balls in the Cavendish experiment were attracted to one another due to a similar density, and therefore a similar harmonic resonance in the micro level would compel the nearby objects to be attracted to one another. This is presumably the same principle that causes oil and water to find their separate resting place in a bottle of vinaigrette or whatever, and of course the same principle that causes an apple to fall from a tree when dropped. There appears to be a non-physical electromagnetic plasma dome or toroidal vortex field in the sky, which would have similar characteristics with a physical dome in the sky. The recently discovered plasma tubes in the lower magnetosphere appear to assist in sustaining the matrix we need to have a familiar laws of physics, including possibly the laws of density and buoyancy, inertia, electromagnetism, possibly friction, and so on. If we're able to travel beyond these superficial boundaries in the sky, we'll need to do a lot better than the Apollo astronauts. For one thing, I believe we need to focus our exploration parallel to the ground, not up into the sky, where non-physical anomalies rotate around the astral plane concentric with the North Pole. As far as I'm concerned, most of the celestial bodies are probably non-physical and are a lot closer than we have been led to believe. I find it possible that the stars are some form of sonic luminescence and are not atomic fusion devices a zillion light years away. It seems that NASA and all world space programs have been placed into our culture in order to distract us from the simple truth. The truth is, we're never going to space. There are no other planets. And the world we're on is nestled within the physical plane. The physical plane may itself be infinite. However, space as we know it is not an infinite expanse full of galaxies and suns and planets and big bangs. The dots of light we can see in the night sky are probably not tangible objects, and we'll never travel to one to take a sample because I believe it's impossible for us to travel up above the Earth much further than 300 miles or so. This has a lot to do with the plasma tubes I mentioned, as discovered by Miss Cleo Lloyd this year from the University of Sydney. If these plasma tubes are of the magnetic fusion variety, they could possibly reach temperatures of up to 10 to the 8th degrees Kelvin, or about 180 million degrees Fahrenheit. I'd love to know how the Apollo astronauts felt when they traveled through the magnetic fusion plasma tubes on their way to the moon many decades prior to their discovery. I suppose that since the plasma tubes in the lower magnetosphere had not yet been discovered, then they wouldn't have had to prepare for them. There wouldn't have been any effect on the astronauts because they didn't actually go to the moon. Now, I'd love to know what NASA's official position will be in terms of the plasma tubes and how they affected their previous missions and how they will affect their upcoming missions. I believe that in order to travel parallel with the ground south beyond the Antarctic and beyond the womb we've all taken for granted, which is constantly generated by Mother Earth herself, if we can travel south to other potential worlds here on the ground on the physical plane, such electromagnetic or plasma barriers would still be a hindrance, but not nearly as dangerous as they would be in terms of space travel, in quotes. We would need some sort of protection or environmental stabilizers, which would need to replicate conditions here in the safe confines of our wonderful world. I've recently set up a petition to abolish the Antarctic and Arctic treaties. It takes about 2 minutes, so please sign the treaty, and please get everyone you know to sign it. This is not just for flat earthers, and the petition is drafted in such a way that you don't even need to be aware of the flat earth movement to sign it under good conscience. This petition is intended to bring attention to the topic of the Arctic and Antarctic treaties. It is not exclusive to a flat earther's paradigm. It would be great if we could ultimately get rid of the antiquated treaties, which amount to a prison sentence to all free peoples in the world. But I would be happy to see the subject get expanded attention simply because this problem doesn't just apply to flat earthers, and this might be a good way to get a larger volume of people involved in at least looking at the Arctic and Antarctic treaties. These treaties are a direct attack on the freedom of all people, of all nations. They're also an overreach of power of government in a sense that even corporations are not allowed to do their thing in the Antarctic. Of course, I'm not nearly naive enough to believe that the government and their masters, the international corporations, are actually obeying the laws associated with the Antarctic Treaty. In fact, I would bet good money that they're already out there, a select group of corporations totally raping Antarctica in order to undercut their competition with lower costs in order to gain a monopoly on whatever industry they wish. I wouldn't be surprised to find many of the big international corporations have been tapping the resources of the Antarctic for decades, and of course the governments would be right along with them getting their cut and providing the legal framework to ensure an infinite monopoly on the possibly infinite plane beyond the confines of our home, which we're not allowed to visit. Well, we're allowed to visit only on a guided tour, but we can't go exploring out there, and sort of makes sense why if you think about what I just mentioned. To me, this is enough motivation for the treaties, the flat earth or round earth. Either way, there's a motive and a huge deception here, which is why this applies to everyone. Please get everyone you know to sign the petition to end the Antarctic and Arctic treaties. The petition, again, was written in such a way that flat earthers understand it completely, but even an average person who's never considered the flat earth would sensibly want to sign it and with a good conscience without misleading them whatsoever. The goal is to get 100,000 signatures by the end of 2016, and I think that's totally doable with your help, of course. At any rate, thanks so much for trudging through another flat earth video with me. Be sure to hang out with us on the Globebusters on our new show times. We just switched to Wednesdays at 8 Eastern and Sundays at 3 Eastern. Also, if you still can't get enough Flat Earth talk, you can hang out with me, Lori Ferrari, and Lawrence Wright on This Week in Flat Earth on Sundays at 6 Eastern. So again, the show times are Wednesdays at 8 Eastern, Sundays at 3, and Sundays at 6, all Eastern Standard Times. All of my videos are free to watch and share. And all the radio shows I do are done for the truth and are done free of charge. I've gone out on a pretty lengthy limb with this whole flat earth truth thing, and my business has suffered tremendously over the last few months since I've been a vocal proponent of this revelation. This might come as a surprise, but it's rather difficult to find sponsors and investors who want to jump on board a flat earth show for some reason. I suppose it's easier to get a mainstream backing if you talk about a glass dome in the sky or a spinning globe Earth, of course. But to me, this whole thing is about the truth. It's not about funding. At the end of the day, I rely on my integrity and the data to draw my conclusions, although it's always fun to theorize. My final point here is that I'm relying heavily on the support of the community. Those of you who would like to help me in my mission to expose the truth, if you'd like to contribute to my efforts and help me continue making videos and doing the weekly shows, your support is greatly needed and appreciated. This is, of course, optional and voluntary, but if you like my work and you think it makes a difference and you'd like to see me continue on this path, you can contribute any amount via PayPal to johnelance@gmail.com. Contributing via PayPal is the best option. But if you don't like PayPal, I've set up a fan funding account, which you can find directly on my YouTube homepage. And I've set up these methods of support in response to the requests of my subscribers who asked for it. Again, my videos are always free, and I'll never try to sell you anything. I'll never force anyone to watch my videos, and nor will I force anyone to contribute to my efforts. I would like to quickly and humbly thank those of you who have contributed so far. I'm so immensely grateful and flattered that you folks would think of me during these tough times, and it's only because of you that I'm able to continue on this path. So thank you very much for your support and encouragement, and it really does mean a lot to me, and I will continue with this as long as God allows it. As some of you know, this mission has cost me dearly over the last 7 months, but I know that it will pay off in the end, and it's only because of you that I keep on trucking. So I love all you guys. I love making flat earth videos, and I really love the truth. This is the most amazing revelation I could have ever imagined, and at the end of the day, it never would have been possible without your support and encouragement. So God bless you all. Spread the word, spread the world, and try to stay perpendicular to the horizon. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and tell someone you know about the petition to abolish the Antarctic Treaty. You don't even have to mention Flat Earth, so that's totally optional. And I'll put links for all this in the description. Thank you so much, and peace.